In the 1800s, forests from Maine to California sheltered trees so vast, a single trunk could yield 10,000 feet of lumber and weigh as much as a diesel locomotive. But the urgent need for ship masts, railroad ties, and frontier homes left Americans facing a simple, brutal question. How do you turn a 15-ton giant into straight, usable planks with nothing but hand tools and water power? The answer would forge a new nation and demand a kind of skill that nearly defies belief. So where did these giants fall, and why risk everything to tame them? Across North America, a handful of regions once held forests where trees reached almost unimaginable proportions. In the Pacific Northwest, Douglas firs towered over the land, with some specimens stretching more than 300 feet into the sky, taller than a 25-story building. Their trunks often measured between 6 and 10 feet across at the base, thick enough that a grown man could stretch out his arms and barely reach halfway around. These giants could weigh anywhere from 15 to 30 tons each, their crowns lost in the morning mist above. California's coastal redwoods grew even larger. In Humboldt and Mendocino counties, redwoods and sequoias stood for centuries, sometimes more than 2,000 years old. The biggest of these trees regularly topped 300 feet, with trunks swelling to 15 or even 20 feet in diameter. A single log could tip the scales at 40 or 50 tons, though handling monsters of that size was rare and dangerous work. Still, 15-ton logs were common enough in the prime stands to shape the entire industry's approach to felling and processing. Farther east, the Great Lakes region was once blanketed with old-growth white pine. In Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, these pines reached 200 feet in height and 4 to 6 feet across. A single white pine log cut from the straight lower trunk could yield up to 10,000 board feet of lumber, enough to build the frames for 10 average houses. Even here, logs weighing 10 or 15 tons were not unheard of, especially before the best timber was cleared for farmland and railroads. The sheer size of these trees demanded new ways of working. No ordinary hand tool or ox team could manage such weight without careful planning. The forests themselves shaped the industry. Dense stands and uneven ground together with the enormous bulk of each log meant that everything from the first swing of the axe to the last cut at the mill had to be adapted to the scale of the giants. Workers faced not just a job, but a physical challenge on a scale few had ever seen. The next steps would depend on muscle, ingenuity, and the relentless drive to turn these living monuments into the planks and beams that built a nation. Demand for lumber. In 19th century America moved faster than the forests themselves. As cities stretched westward and new towns sprang up overnight, wood became the backbone of expansion. Shipyards along the Atlantic coast needed straight, towering trunks for masts and spars. Especially prized were white pines from New England and the Great Lakes, some stretching over 100 feet long and 3 feet thick. British naval contracts alone called for thousands of these giant logs, each one carefully selected, felled, and floated downriver to waiting ships. The price for a single mainmast could rival a year's wages for a skilled laborer. The hunger for wood did not stop at the water's edge. Railroads crisscrossed the continent, their tracks resting on millions of wooden ties. It took about 2,500 ties to lay a single mile of track, and by the late 1800s, the United States was laying thousands of miles each year. Every tie had to be cut from sturdy, straight logs, often white oak, chestnut, or pine, hauled out of the forests and shaped by hand or at nearby mills. The numbers were staggering. In 1870, Kentucky alone produced 214 million board feet of lumber, much of it destined for railroads and the houses that sprang up alongside them. Housing booms followed every new railroad and river port. Settlers on the frontier needed lumber for cabins, barns, fences, and furniture. Urban centers like Chicago and San Francisco devoured timber for tenements, warehouses, and factories. In some places, entire forests vanished in a single generation, their stumps left behind as silent witnesses to the pace of progress. Mill owners and foremen faced a constant puzzle: how to keep up with the endless demand using only water, muscle, and ingenuity. The best mills were built beside fast-moving rivers or lakes, where logs could be floated straight from the woods to the saw. Some owners scouted timberlands years in advance, buying up tracts with the biggest, straightest trees and planning their operations around river drives and seasonal floods. Every decision, from the placement of a mill to the size of its saw, was shaped by the pressure to deliver ever more lumber, ever faster, to a nation hungry for wood. The urgency drove workers to attempt feats of strength and coordination that would test the limits of human endurance and the technology of the day. A single misjudged cut could turn a day's work into disaster. Felling a 15-ton giant called for more than brute force. It demanded precision, teamwork, and a sharp eye for the tree's lean and every whisper of wind. 2 men stood at the base, one on each end of a crosscut saw known as a misery whip. These saws stretched 6 or 7 feet long, their teeth angled to bite deep and clear chips with each pull. Before the first stroke, the pair studied the trunk for any twist or sweep, then hammered springboards into notches above the swollen base. Standing on these narrow planks, sometimes 6 feet off the ground, they could saw above the flared roots, ensuring a straight, usable butt log. The first cut was the undercut, or face notch, a wide wedge on the side where the tree should fall. This notch set both the direction and the hinge, guiding the trunk's weight as it crashed down. The sawyers worked in rhythm, their arms moving like a single machine. Behind them, wedge men stood ready, driving iron wedges into the growing saw kerf to keep the blade from binding and to encourage the tree's lean. Each wedge was set in sequence, one after another, so the cut stayed open and the fall could be controlled. As the back cut approached the holding wood, tension in the air was matched only by the strain in the men's muscles. A single shout warned the crew to clear out. With a final wedge driven home, the giant began to tip, groaning under its own weight. The pair dropped their saw, jumping clear as the tree crashed to earth exactly where planned, leaving a clean, straight stump and a log ready for the next ordeal. Every step, from the geometry of the cuts to the order of the wedges, was a test of both skill and nerve. For these crews, the difference between success and disaster was measured in inches and seconds. Getting a 15-ton log from the deep forest to the mill took more than strength. It demanded timing, teamwork, and clever use of the land itself. As soon as a tree hit the ground, crews sprang into action. The first challenge was moving the trunk across rough, uneven ground, sometimes for miles, before it ever touched water. Oxen teams, prized for their power and steady pace, hauled these giants over special skid roads. Workers laid down parallel logs, then smeared them with a thick mix of animal fat and soap. This homemade grease turned the rough path into a slippery track, letting even the heaviest logs slide with just enough muscle and coaxing from the teamsters. Each log was chained to a set of iron tongs, and with a shout and a crack of the whip, the oxen leaned into their yokes. Men walked alongside, using peavies, long poles tipped with a sharp hook and spike, to nudge and steer the log, keeping it from veering off course or snagging on a root. When the ground froze solid in winter, the work sped up. Ice turned muddy trails into natural highways, and crews could move more timber in a few weeks than in the whole summer. But land only got them so far. Rivers were the true highways of the timber trade. Once the logs reached the water's edge, workers waited for the right moment, usually the spring thaw, when swollen streams ran fast and deep. Log drives were a test of nerve and coordination. Men called river pigs balanced on rolling logs, guiding them with peavies to keep the flow steady and break up jams before they turned dangerous. Booms, Floating barriers made of chained-together logs herded the timber into long rafts or held them in place until the river rose high enough to carry them downstream. The entire operation ran on timing and trust. A misstep could mean a log lost to the current, or worse, a man swept under. Every drive was a gamble against the river's power. Yet year after year, crews managed to deliver thousands of logs to the mill ponds, ready for the next stage. The journey from forest to water was a feat of muscle and ingenuity, one that relied as much on the workers' skill as on the brute force of oxen and the pull of the river. Rivers did more than carry logs. They powered the entire operation. Mill foremen studied every bend and current, searching for a stretch of water strong enough to turn a heavy wheel and steady enough not to wash the whole works away. Once the right spot was chosen, a dam was built to raise the water level and direct the flow into a narrow channel called a raceway. Here, the river's energy was focused and controlled, ready to be harnessed. At the heart of the system stood the water wheel, sometimes 20 or 30 feet in diameter. The most efficient design for heavy work was the overshot wheel, where water poured over the top, filling buckets along the rim and using gravity to deliver the strongest possible push. A well-built overshot could produce between 50 and 100 horsepower, enough to move thousands of pounds of timber every day. Even so, the river's power was never constant. Spring floods could overwhelm the wheel, while late summer droughts slowed everything to a crawl. Every foreman had to balance risk and reward, adjusting sluice gates and monitoring the wheel day and night. The wheel's slow, steady spin was only the beginning. Large wooden gears transferred this motion to a crankshaft, which drove a pitman arm, a sturdy wooden beam that changed the wheel's rotation into the up and down motion needed for sawing. This simple but ingenious linkage meant that the river's flow could be turned, stroke by stroke, into the relentless motion of a saw blade. The entire system depended on careful maintenance and teamwork. Workers greased bearings, cleared debris from the raceway, and kept a close eye on every bolt and beam. A single jammed paddle or broken pitman could bring the whole mill to a standstill, putting both the crew's pay and the season's output at risk. Inside the sawmill, the real contest began where steel met wood. For a log weighing 15 tons, the choice of saw could mean the difference between steady progress and a day lost to frustration. Sash saws, the old workhorses of American mills, used a heavy wooden frame to hold one or more thin blades under constant tension. The entire frame slid up and down in tall wooden guides, driven by the water wheel's crank and pitman arm. This design allowed several blades to cut at once, and a sash gang could slice a thick log into multiple planks in a single pass. But the frame itself was heavy, and every stroke meant fighting friction. The more blades added, the more power the river had to provide. Still, for wide, straight logs without many knots, a sash gang could turn out 2,000 or 3,000 board feet in a day. Muley saws took a different approach. They used a single thick steel blade guided at the top and bottom, free of the bulky frame. This let the blade move faster, sometimes up to 300 strokes per minute, and with less wasted effort. Muley saws needed less power, which meant mills could keep running even when the river ran low. The thicker blade was less likely to jam or buckle when it hit a knot or twisted grain, making it a favorite for unpredictable logs. With a properly tuned muley, a skilled sawyer could push through tough timber with fewer stoppages and less downtime spent sharpening or resetting the blade. Feeding a log into either saw was its own challenge. Early carriages moved by hand, but as logs got bigger, inventors added worm screw feeds, hand-cranked gears that advanced the log a precise distance after each cut. Some mills patented screw-feed carriages that let the sawyer control the log's movement inch by inch. The foreman's choice of saw and carriage wasn't just about speed. It was about matching the tool to the timber, squeezing every usable plank from each giant that came through the door. A 15-ton log, freshly pulled from the mill pond, rested on iron rollers at the edge of the saw carriage. Before the first cut, the crew faced a moment of careful choreography. The dogger and setter moved in, each step measured, one man bracing the log with a heavy hooked chain, the other guiding its bulk into a V-shaped cradle built to keep giants from rolling. The cradle's angled timbers and iron rails were not just for support. They forced the log to settle in one position, locking it tight against the steel teeth that would soon bite in. Iron dogs, long sharp spikes, sometimes a foot in length, were hammered deep into the log's bark. With each blow, the setter watched for the slightest shift. Too shallow, and the log could twist free. Too deep, and the wood would split under pressure. When both ends were secured, the head sawyer stepped up, eyeing the alignment. He checked the carriage rails, some stretching over 20 feet, making sure the log's heartwood ran true to the saw blade. Only then did he signal for the feed screw to engage. The first turn was slow, deliberate, a final chance to correct before the saw met wood. Once the carriage moved, there was no going back. The commitment was total, and the work of muscle and steel had truly begun. The saw bit into the log, and the mill's hardest work began. A single 15-ton log could take hours, sometimes a full day to cut, each pass demanding focus and grit. The head sawyer, balanced on the carriage, read the grain and called the rhythm, every vibration rattling through the crew. Setters and doggers, faces smeared with sweat and sawdust, braced for each adjustment, knowing a moment's distraction could bring disaster. Off-bearers and tail sawyers, usually the youngest or newest, waited at the end, ready to haul away slabs as soon as they dropped. Each board could weigh 100 pounds, and the pace never slowed. Shifts often ran 11 hours or more, 6 days a week. The mill's air thickened with dust, the saw's roar drowning out all but shouts. Fatigue was constant. Attention never wavered. One slip near the blade could mean a lost hand, or worse. In 1881, workers in Peshtigo, Wisconsin, petitioned for better safety guards, a rare protest in a trade that valued speed over safety. Even with steam donkeys to help move logs, most of the weight still fell on human shoulders. By day's end, every stacked plank was a measure of risk and endurance. Every plank from those giants was earned with sweat, grit, and human ingenuity. Today, nearly all lumber is milled by machines, but the fingerprints of manual labor still shape our built world. As forests shrink and technology advances, the question remains, what do we value more, efficiency or the mark of human hands? Thanks for joining this look at the roots of American craftsmanship.